It's Wednesday in Simpsonville, 3 to 4 inches of snow on the ground, and it's still coming down. We're in the book of Exodus. 5 questions for you. See how well you know what's contained in chapter 3. How did Moses question God about his mission to deliver the people out of bondage? How did Moses question God about his mission to lead the people out of bondage? Question number 2. What was God's reassurance to Moses that he was adequate for the task? What was God's reassurance of Moses that he was adequate for the task? Question number 3. Who did God say Moses should say sent him? Who did God say Moses should say sent him? Question number 4. What is interesting about chapter 3, verses 8 and verses 17, when thinking about the spies' report later in the book of Exodus in the promised land? What happens in chapter 3 that should come back to our minds when we get out into chapters that talk about the spies coming back from the promised land? Question number 5. What was the reaction of the Israelites when told about God's concern and his plan to deliver them? What were the Israelites' reaction when they found out about God's plan and concern for them? Well, how did God hear Moses questioning him? Moses said what a lot of us say when God calls us to a task. Who am I that I should lead the people out of bondage? We think that we've got to do it in our own strength, and we always think that we're inadequate for God's task. Sometimes we think we're adequate for our own tasks, but not for God's tasks. He said, who am I? I don't think a lot of us say that when God asks us to do something. Question number 2, God's reassurance. It's really quite interesting because you see, when God reassures Moses in chapter 3, verse 12, he says, certainly, now listen, certainly I will be with you. Then further, if you read carefully in verse 12, when you have, not if you've brought the people out of bondage and into the promised land, but when you have brought them out, you shall worship the God on this mountain. Question number 3. Who did God say Moses should say sent him? A very interesting verse again, as we see that God said, say I am. I and the word am. It's interesting because as we get into the Gospel of John in the New Testament, Jesus used the same phrase at least 9 times. I am. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. I am the vine and you are the branches. He said, I am the good shepherd. And he said that he was the light of the world. I am the light of the world. He said that he was the door. He said that he was, in fact, the way, the truth, and the life. Isn't it interesting? God said, say, I am sent you. And when we say, who is our Savior, we can say, I am is my Savior. I am the bread of life. I'm the living water. I'm the vine. I am the door. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am saved me. Question number 4. What is interesting about chapter 3, verses 8 and 17 when thinking about the spies' report later in the book of Exodus? Well, God repeats twice, just in chapter 3, that there are going to be people in the land. As a matter of fact, he names the tribes. He says the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Jebusites, and so on. He tells them that they're in the land. As a matter of fact, he also tells them they're going to have to drive them out of the land. And yet when the spies come back, they act all surprised that there are people in the land. They act all surprised because there's fortified cities and that it's going to be difficult. But we all know that when God asks us to do something, there's nothing too difficult for him. Question number 5. What was the reaction of Israelites when they heard about God's concern for them and his plan to deliver them? You'll find it in chapter 3, verse 31. They bowed low and worshiped him. When you consider all of the ways that God has delivered you, when you think of all of the ways that he's helped you, provided for you and guided you through life, how he's always been there, even in the darkest hours, and he's always led the way in the greatest victories. Why not bow down and worship him today? That's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.